Welcome to Fill the Void podcast, where we discuss unhealthy human habits caused by the society of consumption. Welcome to Fill the Void podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by J.K. Emezi, a certified addiction coach, sex and pornography addiction recovery coach, and the CEO of Elevated Recovery, which is an online addiction recovery agency. J.K., with a personal triumph over a decade-long battle with porn addiction, crafted the Porn Reboot System. This is a refined method empowering individuals to regain control of their sexual behavior. Join us as we delve into this journey, the Porn Reboot System, and his commitment to lasting recovery and personal growth. Welcome, J.K., to Fill the Void.
Thank you for having me, Roberta. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about your story since you were young? Tell us about your upbringing.
Well, I was raised in a pretty conservative family. I was raised in a Catholic family, raised to be a good boy. Parents were in the medical field, and everything was going well till I was exposed to pornography. And that happened when I was about 8 years old.
And how did that happen?
Yeah, my parents would go out and work since they were doctors. My dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse. And so we were what we call latchkey kids, which is they tell you to stay at home, don't open the door for anybody ever, unless it's your parents. But we had a cousin, older cousin, maybe 16, 17. She used to come by to just make sure we were okay. And one day she brought a comic book. She was reading the comic book, and I loved comic books as a kid, really wanted to read it, but she wouldn't let me. So I was so determined. One day I found out where she was hiding it.
Yeah.
I got it and I read it, and it was actually pornographic in nature. So think about this. I'm 8 years old. I know this is naughty. I know I'll be in trouble with my parents if they saw me seeing it, but it's in illustrated form. It's drawn. It's crazy. I don't want to say anything that would trigger somebody, but as a kid, I'm not capable of being sexually aroused. So when I see this, I get scared because I'm like, whoa, this is sex? This is what my mom and dad do? This is crazy. But what happened was I got really scared. There was this release of adrenaline and my state changed. As a kid, I didn't know my state was changing. I just knew I felt different when I looked at that. So what happened after that, Roberta, was that every time that I was in trouble with my parents, anytime I got rejected, anytime I didn't get what I wanted, I knew that if I viewed nudity, my state would change. I'd get excited, something would change. And this continued until I was about maybe 13, 14 years old, and I learned how to masturbate. And that was when I was like, oh my God, orgasm. This is something different. And I was off to the races from there. From then onwards, anytime I felt anything that happens to you when you're a teenager, you get rejected, you have acne, you don't feel attractive, you feel fat, skinny, whatever, I would run to pornography.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy because it also happened to me in my life with many addictions. It's like whenever you feel uncomfortable, whatever it is that's happening, you just go into that thing. Could be bad, could be something that even harms yourself. But it just relieves you from that pain or uncomfortable feeling. And how did your parents know about this, or how did they react?
Well, they didn't know about it.
They
In fact,
didn't
they
know.
didn't know about it till, I don't know, 20 years later or something, when they saw my mom saw my YouTube video. She was like, what? You were struggling with this? So the thing with pornography is that there's so much shame attached to it. So it's not something that I was comfortable talking to my parents
But
about.
everyone does it, so it's only stigma around it because it's so
Exactly.
normal. Like with every problem that there is in this world, I always say there's so much stigma. Nobody even vocalizes the things. So
Agreed.
yeah,
No, I'm with you on that. I think the issue is that not enough people talk about it, and the stigma makes something like sexual behavior, which has so much healthy aspects to it. It makes it this unhealthy thing. And definitely, if I could have gone back and spoken to my parents about it, I don't think my life would have taken the trajectory it did.
yeah. But how did you realize it was unhealthy? How can you differentiate if it's unhealthy or not, or normal?
Yeah.
How do you call these things?
Yeah. I think the main word there is compulsive. Compulsive is
Compulse.
when you engage in a behavior and despite the negative impact it's having on your life, despite the fact that you want to stop and it's no longer serving the purpose that it was originally serving, you still can't stop. So it's like somebody who is masturbating, but despite the fact that you don't feel the same amounts of pleasure, maybe you even hurt yourself down there. You're like, I
Yeah.
don't care. I'm still going to keep doing it. Yeah, now it's having an impact on your health and you can't stop, right? Or if somebody's addicted to sex and they're like, I don't even feel like having sex anymore. I physically don't want to. My body can't take it anymore, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to get orgasm. Or someone who's addicted to love. I know I shouldn't fall for that guy. I shouldn't fall for that girl, but they hit the right triggers for me. So I'm still going to go hang out with them. I know how this is going to go. I know exactly how this movie ends, but I keep doing it over and over again, waking up the next day or weeks later and going like, yeah, I feel like shit yet again, and I
Yeah.
can't stop. So anytime it's having an impact on any domain of your life, physical, social, mental, spiritual, or otherwise, and you cannot stop, even if you want to, then it's a compulsive behavior.
And was there a moment that made you realize that you needed a change, or how was that moment or thing or something that happened that made you realize you had to change?
With an addictive behavior, there are many moments where you should have realized, right? But you just don't. So I'll pick one of them that I remember because a lot of times, as my behavior progressed, there was
Mhm.
substances involved, and always there was sex involved, right? So there's just a lot of times I don't remember. I know there were many mornings I woke up in places where I was just like, "What the fuck did I just do to myself again?" Fuck! I need to stop. You, JK, you need to stop doing this. You just need to stop. And then it'd be cool for like a month. I'll be a good boy for like 2 months, and the shit will go again. You're nodding your head, so I know you get what I'm saying.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course. That's why I make this podcast.
Yeah, you're like, I get it. I get it.
Yes.
But there was one specific time. So for me, I had very low self-esteem. I didn't feel I was an attractive person. And when I was in my early 20s, I I got to the point where I was just like, I wanted to be in a relationship. I wanted intimacy. I really wanted the simple things. I would see people who were in relationships holding hands, cuddling, and I was like, I just want that. The sex is cool, but I really want closeness to somebody. But I just couldn't get it because I was a weird dude. I would always like fall into the friend zone. Oh yeah, I like you, but just like a friend. Oh, you're such a brother to me. I was like, fuck, I can't deal with this shit. So I kept going into the friend zone. So what would happen is I would get drunk in the evenings. I'd go out to the bars and clubs. I would dance, try to find another girl who was tipsy, but it just never worked out. So I'd end up coming back viewing pornography, and then after that, I'll get on chat sites. Now there's OnlyFans. Back then, there wasn't any of that, but you could pay, get on the chat sites to go talk to you. And the worst part was that for me, they would just tell me I'd started working out, so I had a decent body. They would start saying like, "Oh my God, you're so cute, but you're cute though. Why don't you have a girlfriend?" And all the while, I'm still paying them money,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So this became my refuge every evening. And then at one point, I remember I would get so angry after this. I would see how much I spent. Then I would get on websites to try and look for anonymous sexual encounters. So now not only was I going out and drinking, coming back watching porn, doing the chat thing, but now it was 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And I was like, it's not enough. So the behavior was escalating. I needed to
Yeah.
find sex. One day, somebody had sent a message, an anonymous message. It wasn't on an app, it was on a website. I think it was Craigslist, and they said it was a girl, and
Yeah.
she says, "Oh, I'm babysitting for this family," and she sent her picture, which is of course blurry, and I sent my picture back, which is not blurry, and she was like, "Yeah, come on over." So she gave me the address. So tipsy, and I jumped into my car and I drove across town to this place. I remember it was really cold. I pulled up in this neighborhood behind these houses and I didn't see her. So I was just like, hey, I was texting in my car. I was like, where you at? My
Yeah.
car was in automatic. It wasn't in park. I put it in drive,
Yeah.
and I'm texting her, and I'm just like, "Hey," and she's like, "Yeah, I think I see your car. Just come out." And I was like, "Yeah, but I need to see you." See, despite everything, even while I was doing this, I was still raised from a Catholic family. So even while I did this, there were certain lines I wouldn't cross. So in my head, I was just thinking, I would keep thinking, if I get caught, it's the end of the I'm screwed. I can't
Yeah.
imagine my parents like the shame that it will bring to my family if they were like, oh,
Yeah.
like my mom telling my aunt saying like, oh, I heard JK like was like doing some fucked up sexual stuff in
Yes.
Kansas, right? So I didn't come out. And as I was there sitting texting, the side window of my vehicle smashed. I heard some guys talking and it
Yeah.
smashed. And I just remember the glass coming in and there was a wooden stick or something. I don't remember because I've been drinking.
Yeah.
The only thing that saved me is I didn't put my car on park. So my
Thank
gut reaction
God.
just to hit the
Yeah.
accelerator and
Yeah.
the car moved. So it drove through the backyard of that house. There were kids' toys, trampoline, the little plastic rubber pool.
Mhm.
I drove through all that stuff, came out on the other side. And I
Yeah.
remember driving off and my hands were gripping the steering wheel. And I just remember shaking as I drove home. And I kept telling myself, JK, you weren't raised like this. You weren't raised like this. You weren't raised like this. I drove all the way home. And I remember viscerally when I got home, that was the day that I realized that I could have died. It could have been some weird setup. Who knows what it would have been? I could have gone to jail. I could have just been some other dude who was just gone because of that. And that was the day I started seeking help for my behavior.
Also, one of the questions that I'm going to ask you, how do you define addiction?
Yeah. I define addiction the same way that I define compulsive, especially when we're talking about something that has to do with pornography. I actually have a problem with the definition of addiction simply because I think it carries a lot of beliefs with it. So we prefer to use the word compulsive behavior. In our marketing and when I speak about porn addiction and sex
Like bad, you mean addiction has like a bad name, right?
I think it not only has a bad I wouldn't say a bad name, I would say it has I'll give you an example. When people
Yeah.
talk about and say someone's an addict, we think of the stigma, like you said before. We
Yes.
think of someone on the streets. We think of somebody who makes bad decisions. We think of somebody who is, oh, he's an addict. Therefore, he's an addict to
Yes.
everything. He
Yeah.
must be addicted to sex, porn, drugs, everything. And the person carries that judgment. There's also the assumption that you have to be an addict forever. Oh, hi, my name is Roberta and I'm a recovering whatever.
Exactly.
For the rest of your life, you're supposed to be that way. So I'm not a big fan of the word addict because I don't believe that we are defined by the label, as cliche as that sounds.
I
I
really like what
believe
you're
that,
saying. Yeah,
yeah,
completely.
everybody has the ability to redeem themselves and restore themselves. And we weren't put on this planet to be an addict forever. It's just a part of your story.
Yeah, it completely. But it's also some personalities are more compulsive than others. That's what I see also, right?
I think upbringing, personality, environments can affect people in certain ways. And I think many people can become, how would I put it? Some people are probably more susceptible to certain addictions than others. Yes.
Yeah. And you're a certified addiction coach. So how do you treat addiction?
Yeah. The way we work with, we have a concept called rebooting, and
Mm-hmm.
our flagship program is called Porn Reboot. So it's the P with the little button in there.
Yes.
I use the word rebooting, first of all, instead of recovery, because recovery carries this idea that you have to recover that which you lost to your addictive behavior, which is nice. But if you were
Yeah.
an addict, let's say all through your early 20s, and then you're 31, 32, and now you're trying to recover that which you lost when you were 21, what are you really recovering? You're never going to be 21 again, right? The
Exactly.
ship has sailed for
Yes.
that. Everything is gone. It is better for you to start where you are in the present moment. And it's so much easier to hit the reset button and let go of everything. Let go of the expectations of the past. let go of what your sponsor or your therapist tells you should be. Because if you were an addict through your 20s and now you're 30, you're seeking direction, but you're very vulnerable too, because somebody could
Completely.
tell you, you know what a good recovered person is? Somebody in a sober community. A good recovered person is only in a committed relationship. A good recovered person is a Christian. A good recovered person does this and this and this. And if you don't do any of those things, then you're going to relapse, right? And it's over for you.
Yeah.
That didn't work for me. So we came up with the term rebooting. You hit the reset button, and it has 3 pillars. It starts with changing your habits. Changing a habit, it's all well and good. Habits like your boundaries, your behaviors, the people you hang out with, having good self care. But I'm not a big fan of just habits alone. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of coaches out there who are just like, oh, change your habits. I'll help you become
Yes.
sober. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you have to change your lifestyle too. Now, changing your lifestyle is wonderful. Living a sober lifestyle, a clean lifestyle, boundaries, the right type of people, but it's also not enough. Why? Because our lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
We get into relationships, we move to different places, our financial situations change. The final piece that has to change for this to be permanent is your self image, the
Yeah.
way you view yourself. When you view
Yes.
yourself as a person who no longer has a need for this on a deep level, then you are free of the behavior.
Completely. Yeah, it's like these stories and narratives that we have in our heads. That's why your word is so important, like restart, like and build and other stories, other narratives completely. But do you think that it's possible to live a life with in balance with these things? Or you have to become extremely sober? Like what do you think about going to, because when you have a compulsive behavior, you're in one extreme of like doing that thing all the time until it affects your life. But
Yeah.
like going to the other extreme of never doing it, do you think that's healthy or unhealthy?
No, I don't think that's healthy. And that's why we are doing rebooting,
Yeah.
not recovery. I don't believe in a life of balance either. I simply believe in priorities. I think that when a person hits the reset button on their life and redefines their values, that process you talked about of changing your story, you're not just changing the story into a story that sounds better. You're changing your story into a story that resonates with your deepest values, the things you
Yeah.
care about. And there are only so many things we can give a fuck about. Once
Mm-hmm.
you have redefined and told yourself a new story based on the values that are important, prioritize those things. You don't have to live, people might see it as an extreme life, but you're just like, I know the things I'm into. I know, for example, personally, um, I enjoy taking care of my health. I enjoy my spiritual journey. I enjoy travel. I enjoy um, I enjoy building my business. I actually enjoy what I'm doing. And that's
Yeah.
it. Like there are a lot of other things I could be into, but if people were to see me on social media, they're like, "Damn, dude, you really go all into these things." And I'm like, "Well, those are the things I'm into, right? Those
Yeah.
are the things I focus on." I think sometimes there's another stigma, and it's the stigma of the sober person, the
Yes.
sober lifestyle, the person who's unfortunately their new identity is I'm a sober person. I'm in the sober community. I'm like,
Yes.
screw that. Just find your thing. And your thing, like in our program, we don't allow clients to stay in our program more than 2 years. When you're done, I need you to leave. I don't need you
Mm-hmm.
becoming codependent on me or the community. I don't need you trauma bonding with JK because you can relate to JK's story. I need you to understand that you, Roberta, are the best expert at yourself. I'm not the expert. I'm just a guy who saw the movie and I was like, I know what happens in the movie. Go here, go here, go
Yeah.
here. But the rest of the story is yours. And you don't need to hang around once you've gotten what you need.
Completely. Completely. And like when you're in this process of changing your story, how do you overcome any setbacks when you feel you like go 3 steps lower? You know, you're like changing, moving forward, and suddenly something happens. How do you deal with that?
Slips are simply data. I think for a lot of people who are going through the process, they are very reactive, right? So I'm moving this way. I've had like a wonderful whatever. Let's say you've had a great year. You're
Yeah.
doing so well. You're so happy. People talk to you and like, hey, how you doing? You're just like, you know what? I'm in a good place. Things are really good.
Yes.
And then 2 weeks later, you just fuck it up and it feels
Yes.
as if the entire year was gone. And you're just like,
Yes.
it feels as if nothing changed. In fact, you go back to the
To everything.
worst behavior. You don't even go back to the
Yeah.
vanilla stuff. You just went
Exactly.
straight back from, let's say you were at 10, then you went from
Yeah.
10 to 0. It's
Yes.
you skip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You go straight to 10. And you're just like, you know what? I think I don't think I'm ever going to get away from this. It's where the hopelessness comes up.
Yes.
And I tell my clients, this is normal. This is the story of everybody dealing with a compulsive behavior. What you need to learn is, first of all, to start viewing this as data, which means step away from the emotion. It happened for one of a few reasons. There's a boundary you crossed. There's some self-care you didn't take care of. Like, oh, what is it? I was like, it could have started from something really simple, right? It's the holidays, for example. You had family come down. Somebody said something super triggering. You got pissed off about it because your mom always says shit and it sticks in your head. And then instead of the next day doing your morning routine, working through it, talking to your therapist or accountability partner, no. You woke up the next morning late because you had some drinks the night before. You went straight to work, something irritated you, it built up, and then 2 days later, some friend hits you up and just like, "Hey, I'm in town, we need to hang out." And you're like,
Yes.
"Yeah, sure, whatever, let's do it." When you look back, you're like, "Damn, I just let some of my good habits go when Thanksgiving came around. And I had this thing in my head this person said to me, and it just kept playing, and I just didn't process it." Um, so self-care, a boundary, just realizing that it's not about what you're telling yourself, right? What we tell ourselves, like, God, you're stupid. You did it again. Again, you always do this shit all the time. You never learn. That self talk is so damaging. If the self talk were to change, it changes into something that has more grace and forgiveness to it. That when you dialogue with yourself, that, listen, I made a mistake. And yes, it's absolutely normal for me to go back to that behavior because I've been doing this shit for years. Just because I have 1 year off it or a couple of weeks off it doesn't mean that I'm going to start from the beginning. Reminding yourself that as a person with these addictive tendencies, we're used to instant gratification. We want things,
Yeah.
even good things in our life. We want it
Mhm.
tomorrow. Like, why is it taking so long for me to achieve
Yeah.
anything? This is part of the personality.
Yeah, completely. I really like your views on this. And what do you think about like the conditioning of the society? Like we're, raised by our parents with different religions, but they tell you that you have to get married to one person or, stability, all the things that this society like makes us or teach us to do. But maybe in reality, there's other things that makes us feel better. That being in, for example, I'm talking about being in a monogamous relationship. Maybe it's when you like having sex a lot, not in the sense of being compulsive where it affects your life, but having more sex. There's other types of relationships to be in.
Yeah.
Same with other types of behaviors. Like, what do you think about this that I'm saying?
I don't care much for society. I think people should actually do
Makes
whatever
us
it
feel,
is that actually
yeah.
makes them happy. I think like with our clients, for example, a lot of them come in with a very conservative mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and in their head, they also associate recovery with sexual sobriety means being in a committed relationship with one person and being married. But the reality that many of them come to find out from their behavior is, I'm like, do you really think that you were designed to be that way? Not everybody. When you spent years opening different tabs, watching so many genres, like, have you taken a moment to pause and actually think that there's a possibility that you have a capacity for more when it comes to relationships? There's some clients who don't want to have that capacity for more. They're like, I really don't want to do that. I
Yeah.
want to be in a monogamous relationship. And that's fine. We train men, we call it rewiring your brain to monogamy. But we also have a lot of clients who they're very confused and they're just like, well, is it possible? And I'm like, yeah, there are all kinds of relationships. There are open relationships, there are long-term open relationships. Personally and professionally, I'm fine with those, and we have many clients who transition into those relationships.
And can you describe your program in detail? How does it work?
I don't know if I can describe it in detail.
Whatever you can describe.
Yeah, well, our program is it's called the Porn Reboot Program, and like I said, we help men and we work with them in their habits, their lifestyle, and their self-image. But we
Hmm.
also address all the other domains of what we call their reboot capital. Because when a man shows up, his behavior with pornography is a symptom of something else. In my case, it wasn't very complex. I was just a guy who had poor self-esteem, who was very heavily conditioned by culture and by religion, and I had to let go of those things. I had to learn how to become attractive, not just internally. I actually had to learn how to be charismatic. I had to learn how to speak. I had to go out and work out. I had to maximize my looks and the way I carried myself as a man. I teach men how to do that as well. And that's probably what makes us a little bit different as a recovery program, in that we're not just, oh, you're no longer engaging in the behavior, go out there. No, if you suck at dating and you go
Yes,
out there and you've dealt with this behavior, you're still going to have the same negative feelings. So we
exactly.
fix that. So we have a program called the Dating Reboot Program. We have a health program called the Optimum U program, which is for a lot of men who are just unhealthy. They don't have great biochemistry, so they have unhealthy habits with sleeping, waking up. We also work with men on their finances. So we have a financial reboot capital program. A lot of men have problems managing their money,
Yeah.
spend a little bit too much in massage parlors, escorts, um, don't believe in themselves a lot. So a lot of that has to do with their mindset and building that up. But ultimately, our first step is to work with men through the different stages of their reboots. Early reboot stage, middle,
Got it.
late, and the maintenance stage. And in our program, that takes about a year and a half to 2 years for a man to get to a point where he's fully rewired from his behavior.
JK, my last question to you is what are your 5 advices or points you would tell people that are stuck in old unhealthy patterns and how can they make a lasting change? Not only a change.
5 of them.
Yes, five
Yeah.
main ideas.
I would say the first one would be to accept your situation honestly. Like,
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
take a look at your behavior and stop rationalizing and stop lying to yourself. I mean, how many times do you have to wake up in the morning, look around you and go like, "Damn, I did that again," right? And then ask yourself, "How many years have I been doing that for?" That would be the first one. Another one would be a willingness to fail, right? There is no way you're going to get through this with perfection.
Mhm.
You're going to screw up and you're gonna fuck up all the way. And the sooner you get okay with that, the better. The third would be to, um, I would say, have some sort of, well, I'll say this. Remember that slips are data, right? So
Yes.
your slips and your relapses are not a reason for you to beat yourself up or tell yourself that something is wrong with me within me. It just means that there's data. There's something that you can actually learn from that. 5 is a lot, Roberta. I got more than 5. I'm just trying to think of another good one to give you guys. Um, Self-awareness is important. Um, I think one of the biggest practices that people can build when they're trying to end an out of control behavior is some sort of self-awareness practice. It doesn't matter whether it is mindfulness, journaling, dialoguing with your sub personality, or doing parts work, something that can bring you into the moment, first of all, and allow you to view yourself from the outside as a third person is very helpful. One more would be work with your brain, not against your brain. And what that means is working with your brain could be described as When you feel a very strong urge, we have a
Yeah.
tendency to fight the urge, right? Like, oh my God, it's there. I'm gonna do it again. It's so strong. Damn, I distracted myself. I did this, I did that, but
Yes.
it's still coming up, and then you start feeling bad. That is working against your brain. And there is no way you can defeat this thing because this thing is you. It's as powerful as you are. Actually, it is you. You can't defeat
Yeah.
yourself. It's as
Yeah.
cunning as you are.
Yeah.
So you work with your brain by actually accepting it. What does accepting it mean? It means look at the nature of this urge. Like the urge is there, fine, but instead of it's painful, but that pain becomes suffering the more you resist it. When you start looking at the nature of the urge, you're just like, oh, okay. So it gets worse when there are certain thoughts. It's there, but it calms down when there's certain thoughts as well. When I think of certain things or certain people, it increases. All you need to do is learn how to do that. You're not going to be perfect. Sometimes you're going to give into it. But when you work with your brain and allow it to flow, that's the only way that you can end this behavior. And the final piece is to forgive yourself and remember that if you are struggling with a sexually compulsive disorder or a mixture of them, let's say there are substances involved and your
Yeah.
sexual behavior, it's understanding that whatever it was that is this compulsive behavior is not a battle. There's some people who are just like, oh, it's a battle. You got to battle this thing within you. No, this is something within you that originated to protect you. At some point in your life, something was happening to you, and you did not have the coping strategies to deal with it. This was the thing within you that said, I'll make you feel better. Orgasm made you feel good. And when you realize that this is a part of you that's actually all it did was try to help you, it just stayed there for too long and it became
Yeah.
unhealthy, you start showing it compassion. I think instead of trying to separate this from you, make it bad or evil, which is what a lot of cultural and religious conditioning does, I think if we can start showing more compassion and love to that part of ourselves, ultimately we integrate with it. And that which was bad just becomes another part of you and you're able to move on.
Completely. Thank you, JK. I loved this conversation. You're incredible. And thank you for all these amazing insights.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
I'm actually curious as to what addictive behaviors you struggled with.
Oh, okay. I have struggled with all the addictive behaviors.
Met all of them.
Yeah. Well, like I used to play field hockey professionally for my country. So when I quitted that life and that career, I was like, I felt completely empty in my life. Like, what do I do? I was lost. I was like 20 years old. So all that energy that I had, that I put it in the sport, I suddenly started partying and going out, and I started putting all my energy in drugs and being the best at partying. So basically, I
Mm,
ended up in drugs, sex, partying, alcohol. So all these
gotcha.
like coping mechanisms. So yes, that's why I created this concept of filling the void, because there's so many ways we fill the void. It could be like sex, drugs, etc., etc., etc. So I
Okay.
like to expose and talk about these things. Like we were saying, nobody talks about it and there's stigma around it, but everyone goes through these things in different levels, but everyone goes to similar things.
No, that's so good. I'm glad that
Mhm.
you're talking about it and exposing it. How old are you right now?
I'm 29.
Okay, cool. So you've been dealing with this for a while.
Yes.
That's excellent. No. I'm glad you're doing this.